My name is Dr. Kenneth Christie. I'm the Program Head and a Professor in the Human Security and Peacebuilding Graduate Program at Royal Roads University, and I'm the President of the Confederation of University Faculty Associations of British Columbia, or CUFA BC. CUFA BC is the provincial voice for more than 5,500 university professors, instructors, lecturers and academic librarians at 5 research universities across the province. We work with the faculty associations at Royal Roads University, Simon Fraser University, the University of British Columbia, the University of Northern British Columbia, and the University of Victoria. I would like to acknowledge that the land on which CUFA BC's office resides is on the traditional, ancestral and unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples. We acknowledge with respect the diverse histories and cultures of the Squamish, the Tsleil-Waututh, the Musqueam and the Stoyo nations. We are here today to present the winners of the 2024 CUFA BC Distinguished Academic Awards. These awards honour the outstanding scholarship and public policy contributions of distinguished academics in British Columbia, academics whose scholarly activity have made significant contributions to the community beyond the academy. We believe that the ideas that flow from universities contribute in significant ways to the public good, to our citizenry and to our democratic landscape, our intellectual life and our economy. The awards demonstrate the necessity and vitality of public universities, especially the value of research. I am pleased to present the winner of the 2024 CUFA BC Paz Buttedahl Career Achievement Award, Dr. Francis Juanes. This award recognizes contributions to the community over a lifelong career dedicated to the pursuit of knowledge and truth, advocacy and building community and relationships. Dr. Juanes joins us today to talk about his research.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Can you tell me about your research interests briefly?
I guess I call myself a fisheries ecologist with a PhD in coastal oceanography. So I've been interested in a particular stage of fishes, the juvenile phase, which is the one between the larvae and the adults, because I think it's a very important and understudied stage. And so all aspects of the ecology of juvenile fishes. And I'm also very interested in underwater bioacoustics and the role of and the effects of noise. So those are the 2 primary thrusts, I guess, of my work at the moment.
Now, your nominators described your career as fundamentally transforming the way that scientists model fish population dynamics. Tell me about your work in this field and how you challenge the most significant issues facing aquatic ecosystems.
Aquatic ecosystems are vast. I tend to work mainly in the ocean, but I've done some work in freshwater, and what I'm going to say really applies to both. So the ocean ecosystem is the last place on Earth where we still harvest wild animals. That doesn't happen on land. And so that makes it a very unique problem. But we don't see these animals. And so we need to decide how many we're going to take. We need to allocate who's going to take them. And so we need to manage those fisheries. That's a very difficult task. And we use models based on population dynamics, which are births and deaths at the population level, to try and model those populations and figure out how to harvest them sustainably. So my role, there have been a couple of things that I think I've added a little bit to that. One is to remember that fish are individuals, and that what happens at the individual level, at the small scale, is really important. So things such as predator-prey interactions, competition among juvenile fishes in small spaces eventually multiplies to the population. So incorporating behavior and individual-based ecology into these population dynamics models, I think can be very important. And in some ways, the consideration of multiple species has led to what we call ecosystem-based management, where we consider not only the target species that we're after, but everything else that surrounds that species, what it eats, what eats it, the nature of the water that it lives in, and of course, the humans and their impact. Secondly, my other contribution is fundamental because it's a way to think about fish populations by only looking at their size. Size turns out to be a really important trait in fish species. And so you can simplify many of these models by just considering how large they are. And that will help you explain much of the ecology of these species. And so that's been a major contribution, I think, as well through my career.
You have a remarkable record of pioneering research in soundscape ecology and the use of this tool as an index of ecosystem health. Tell me about your work in creating a Canadian-specific acoustic catalogue of ocean soundscapes.
I will try to do that. Again, as I mentioned, the ocean is vast, and animals use different signals to communicate, to orient, to find their prey, to figure out where their predators are. If you think about it, light doesn't travel very far underwater. Neither does odor. Neither do most signals. But sound, as it turns out, travels very far and very fast, much faster than it does in air. And so it's no surprise then that this is used as a sensor by many animals in both freshwater and marine systems to communicate, to orient, to find their food. And so soundscape ecology then is the study of those soundscapes and the animals that live within them. I think it's fair to say that most people know that whales and other marine mammals make sounds. It's been known for a long time, but what's much less known is that most fish make sounds as well. And so we have documented now about 1,000 species of fish that make sounds, and there's species-specific sounds. There's a few others that perhaps don't make sounds, but considering that there are about 25,000 fish species, we have a lot more work to do to understand this vast, understudied biodiversity. And one of the reasons why it's been understudied and unexplored is because there was this assumption that the ocean was silent. And one reason for that is that humans don't hear very well underwater, and so they assume nobody else did. But as it turns out, it's not silent. It's a cacophony of sound. And so we are trying to document this diversity. One way we've done that is to put a database together and a website, and it's called fishsounds.net. And it tries to bring together everything we know about fish sounds and all those sounds that have been documented. And so that grows every day as people explore and discover more and more sounds. You could go right down to the harbor right now, put a hydrophone in the water, and discover a new sound, which is amazing, because if that was a bird sound, I would make the news.
Absolutely.
But not if it's a fish sound. So, and the other really important part of this, so biological sounds are not unique underwater. They're not the only part of the soundscape. In addition to biological sounds, we have geological sounds, the geophony as we call it. So the winds, the waves, the rain, the ice, all that makes sounds as well. And that, of course, has been around forever. What hasn't been around forever and has been increasing exponentially are human-made sounds. Wow. And so those are the main sources of those sounds, which we call noise generally, are ships and all sorts of ocean exploration and ocean construction. And so this has opened a whole brand new field of soundscape ecology, trying to understand what the effects of this increasing noise are on marine organisms. And the more we look, the more we realize that those effects are generally negative. And so we're understanding that, we're trying to study it. And it also means that there are particular signals to healthy habitats from a sound perspective. And we can hear that, we can say that's a healthy environment. Whereas we might go to one that isn't as healthy. And from a sound perspective, we can tell that.
Yeah.
The other reason this work is important is because there are environments, ecosystems, which until very recently were considered pristine. An example is the Arctic Ocean. Ships were not able to traverse the Arctic until very recently, and because of climate change. And so here's an environment where noise did not exist till very, very recently. And so it's a chance to explore what the effects are going to be on the fish populations there and a lot of the marine mammals. So a lot more work to be done.
Wonderful. Now, one of your most cited papers is a global analysis of microplastic consumption in humans. What was this research, and what can we do to address microplastics in the environment?
Yeah, it's surprising how cited that paper is. I never knew that would happen. We wanted to try and estimate what the consumption is by humans of plastics. Turns out it's a very difficult thing to do because we don't know what the plastic concentration of most of the diet of the average human is. So we took the average diet of a North American male human, and for those food sources, tried to figure out what the microplastic concentration. It turns out that we could only do that for about 20% of the caloric intake, but that still led to really, really large numbers of microplastics being consumed by humans. And that doesn't count all those microplastics that are in the air right now that we absorb when we breathe.
Right.
And if, for example, you incorporate plastic water bottles, for example, then those rates go up even higher. And more work is going on to understand that, in both in humans and in animals. The part that we don't really understand yet is what is the effect. So if I tell you that you have 10,000 particles in your system, is that a lot? Is that a little? What kind of effect does that have? And so we're not there yet.
Sure.
In terms of what to do about it, it's quite simple actually. Don't use plastic. Don't use plastic water bottles. We produce a lot of microplastics from cloth. So try and use natural cloth rather than cloth that is made from plastic residues. So that's one way to start eliminating plastic in our oceans. Most of the plastic we produce ends up in the oceans. And it's similar with noise. What's the way to eliminate noise? Stop making it.
Yeah.
And for noise especially, of course, for plastics are always going to be there.
Right.
But for noise, the moment you stop that source of noise, the noise is gone. So unlike a lot of other pollutants, it's really, really easy to stop the source of the pollution. So
Your work contributes to the understanding of climate change and fosters meaningful connections to marine life. Why is it important for you to engage in research that's in the public interest?
Well, first and foremost, as a university professor at a public institution, I am funded directly by the government to do my work. And so I feel that I'm responsible and need to provide feedback to the taxpayers who fund very generously our universities. That makes me responsible for the work that I do. But not only that, of course, I apply for grants. Those grants often come from government sources, so NSERC and DFO and Environment Canada. And again, that money comes from our tax dollars as well. So that makes me responsible. And so not only that, but I feel like you have to also let the public know what it is you do in some sort of fashion. I'm using their support. And so it's critical, and the world is changing so fast that we need to contribute important information towards that. Climate change is a very complicated subject, and so sometimes it's better to cut it into little pieces, and as we do, and describe that part of it. And so the other way that I've tried to contribute to public understanding is through education. I think education is vital. And for example, in our fish sounds work, we currently have a project called Fish Sounds Educate, where we have a team of people that try and educate the world about the importance of fish sounds and the effects of noise. And we do that from elementary schools all the way up to the college level, and groups of adults in naturalist clubs. And so I think we can do a lot more through education as well.
We focus mainly on your research, but you're also a teacher who takes an active role in training and mentoring students. One of your nominators said that it is through inspiring the next generation of leaders in the field that Francis has made his most important contribution to the community. You have supervised over 64 master's and PhD students, 15 postdoctoral students, and hundreds of undergraduate students. What is the most important message you want your students to take away from their studies with you?
How important they are to those studies. Here I am representing this work, but none of this would have been possible without their very hard work. At this stage in my career, I do very little of the hands-on work, and I really depend on those students. And so they keep me fresh, I learn from them, and hopefully they learn from me. So one of the messages is that it takes hard work to come up with answers to what are very, very difficult problems, but that you can get there. Another really important message, I think, is teamwork. That if you are in a lab, you can't do it all alone. You really have to depend on your lab mentors, your lab partners, to get work done. And so it's been both the most rewarding part of my career, training students, and the most challenging part of my career, because we're not very well trained to educate students as academics, unfortunately. But again, seeing them grow intellectually is one of the pleasures of my life. So it's been very rewarding.
How does your work advance the calls to action in the 2015 Truth and Reconciliation Commission report?
Thank you for that question. That's a difficult one that I struggle with, but one that I tried to address by working on issues that are important to First Nations, as are most of our marine resources. And now I work directly with First Nations to do this. So one example is a home fishery society off the west coast of Vancouver Island. They represent 5 First Nations. We are helping them understand and plan to better monitor their marine resources. And in that case, it's through underwater video and underwater sound focused on rockfish populations that are very, very difficult to monitor otherwise. And so it's been a wonderful collaboration. We just started another collaboration with Home as well, looking at juvenile Chinook salmon off the west coast of Vancouver Island, using a technique that we call microtrolling that they're taking up. And so I'm working with a PhD student and Home to develop techniques that they will then be able to continue past when that student has graduated. We work with other First Nations as well on some of their territories and some of their marine reserves, trying to document underwater biodiversity. I also have a large program in the Arctic now, and so we work with Inuit, with various groups of hunters and trappers there. They're very interested in our work on acoustics in the Arctic, and our tagging work, trying to figure out where a lot of these marine mammals are moving and are they responding to ships. And so I think that's our little bit in this regard.
How does your work support equity, diversity, and inclusion in post-secondary education and scientific research?
I've tried to address EDI as best I can. One way, and the field has changed very much since I started. It used to be very male-dominated field, as was most of science. And now it's been a turnaround. And I think a lot of that has been because of EDI. So a lot more women are joining the profession. But there's still a minority at those upper levels. So trying to train women, especially and other minorities, so that they can join the higher levels, get PhDs, and go off to academia or government positions, I think is really important. So as an example, the Hutton Fisheries program is something I've been very active in. This is a program funded by the American Fisheries Society. And the goal is to increase the number of underrepresented minorities and women in the fisheries profession that has been dominated by men until very recently. And so what that program does is it funds high school students to come into a fisheries lab and work for the summer and get practical skills in that profession. And so I've been very lucky to attract high school students, both in Massachusetts and in BC, to come in the lab and work on a specific project. And most of those students go on to graduate school and work in the profession. So I think that's a really important contribution.
How do you think your research has affected people living in British Columbia?
Well, hopefully in a variety of ways that aren't always obvious. Hopefully my work contributes towards the sustainability of a lot of our marine resources. So the availability of salmon and rockfish for human consumption. Clean waters, by avoiding microplastics and by trying to eliminate noise. But again, I think, as I said earlier, most importantly through education. So educating the youth so that they can become the leaders of tomorrow, and educating the public to why we do what we do, why it's important, and so that they can value what we do. We don't want to be in that ivory tower anymore. I think it's very important to educate the public, and I think that's been my main contribution.
Thank you. Is there anything you wish to say to the nominators or CUFA BC selection committee?
I want to thank the nominators, of course. I'm honored and humbled to be selected by the selection committee, so thank you to them as well. So just a big thank you to everybody that had anything to do with this, and my letter writers as well. I'm inspired by their words.
Thank you. Well, thank you for joining me today to talk about your work. I want to congratulate you again on being awarded the 2024 CUFA BC Paz Buttedahl Career Achievement Award as part of our annual Distinguished Academic Awards series, and I look forward to following your continuing successes at the University of Victoria. Thank you.
Thank you.